Good morning. It is great to be here, just like I was long ago, sitting right there for many, many years. Many of you knew me when I was little, so you're responsible. Thank you. On behalf of Radiant Christian Community, a small fellowship that's determined to be a Radiant Christian community in our neighborhood and beyond, thank you for caring about us enough and for joining God's work in what He's doing around us in sending a team to work and sweat and fix and build and repair so many of the things that were broken or just missing from all around this little property that God had given us in South Dade County. From the bottom into the top of my heart, I want to just again share with you our gratefulness. Not just mine, but all of the people that are associated with our fellowship that see every day the after effects of all of the work that you did, the team that came, and what you did, the team that sent them. We just got back from 4 weeks of summer camp. So after the team came that you sent, we did summer camp. And I'm still alive. That is great. I would love to share with you a lot of the stories of things that happened in summer camp. I think I'm going to do most of those afterwards. Either I'll just talk to you before you leave today or after at Dallas's. God is working. He is working. Jesus said, my Father's always working to this very day, and I too am working. And I would love to give you many of the examples, the proof, the true stories of what God is doing among us, just to encourage you and to glorify Him. But several weeks ago, we were working too, right? I was mainly just driving back and forth to Home Depot as I added to the list. But I would like to share with you this morning 3 things that God has been teaching me over the years about how He is working, and when He is working, what I should do about it. And the first thing that I'd like to share with you is this idea that anything that I do for God is of infinitely lesser value than what I do with God. You see a little mathematical symbol there, the greater than. Anything that I do for God is of less value, infinitely so, than anything that I do with God. Most of what I'm going to tell you today I've borrowed or stolen from Henry Blackaby's Experiencing God. If you haven't done that Bible study, I encourage you to. But I can't claim that any of these thoughts are original. But I do want to share also that in my few years as a follower of Jesus, one of the things that I've learned most is it's the thing that changes my life or that makes the most difference for the kingdom are not those nuggets of information that are, oh, wow, I've never heard that before. Oh, wow, that's new and cool. It's usually the things that I've known all along I just don't practice. So some of the things I'm going to share with you, you've known. And if this is all old news to you, I just encourage you to see what God's telling you about them today. God doesn't need us for anything. He created this world, this whole universe. He created it out of nothing, which tells us that He doesn't need us for anything. And the fact that He would invite us to join Him in His unstoppable plans to seek and to save those who He died for, it's a thought it is so overwhelming, and the little drops of it that I can understand are so incredibly beautiful. The idea that the God of the universe, Almighty, the Creator, who knows that His plan is unstoppable, would stoop down, incline Himself to invite us to join Him What a privilege. What a joy that I have often completely abused into thinking that I need to do more for him because he needs my efforts. And so again, number one is that what I do for God is of infinitely lesser value than what I do with him. Jesus said that no one can come to him unless the Father who sent Jesus draws him. That's John 6:44. He also said that the Holy Spirit, who the Father would send, would convict people of sin and of righteousness and of judgment. Jesus is giving us statements of things that the Father is doing. He says he's working all the time to this very day. So if we're going to join God in his activity, one of the things that I've been learning is that I need to watch and look for the kind of things that God does. Well, he draws people to himself. So I've tried to train my heart and my eyes and my ears to notice when people are asking spiritual questions. If someone is being convicted of sin, if someone is torn up about something that they're doing and they know it's wrong, that may be proof that God's working in their heart. If someone is convicted of righteousness, of just how awesome and holy and perfect God is, and they know that they're not, because they're also convicted by judgment, and they start asking questions about what's going to happen when I die. What's going on at the end of the world? Sometimes that's proof that God may be working in their heart. So I've tried to train my heart and my eyes and my ears to notice when someone is being drawn to the Father, when someone wants to know him better. So when we packed up everything that we owned and put it in an 18-foot Penske truck in 2009 and drove from New Orleans to South Dade County, I didn't go with a whole bunch of plans on programs and initiatives that I was going to start, because in my experience, the programs and initiatives that I've started have proven to be very stoppable. And God's initiatives have proven, in fact, he's declared them to be unstoppable. So even I, as clueless as I am, over time, that message can get through. When we got to Homestead, we just tried to put ourselves in position where we would meet people. Keep our eyes open and our ears open and our hearts attentive to see what kind of things God was doing. And in part of that process, we also needed a place to lay our head. And the first home that we found, it developed mold issues, which I'm more and more I'm convinced that God had his hand in that, because our house had mold issues, we had to go out and try and find a place to live. And we were looking at every square inch of South Dade County, looking for a home that we could rent. And one of the days that we were out looking for a place, we went through the entrance of this community called Waterside. It's a tough place. The pizza guy doesn't go there after dark. God does. And as soon as we entered through the entrance of this community, just something went, I don't know how to describe it more logically than that, but I could just really sense that God was working here. So I started looking for signs, and I would drive around. I drove around for weeks, but I never got out of the van because I didn't know anybody. I'm kind of timid. It'd be weird. So I'd drive around, and then I'd go back to Starbucks or whatever, and I'd plan out we're teaching an English class to migrant workers. I was probably teaching or preparing for an English class, or we were doing a couple Bible studies. I was diligently working hard for God. And he let me know in some of the ways that only God can. He just really impressed upon my heart that I needed to get over myself, because by now I knew the desires that he'd put in my heart for this community. See, another way that feelings are tricky, right? But God says that if we delight ourselves in the Lord, He will give us the desires of our heart. I don't think that means that He will give us whatever we want. I think that He will put into our hearts His desires. He will give us new things to desire that we didn't desire before. And I had such a desire for this community that I was driving around for weeks. I didn't know anybody there. He says that He's working in us to will and to act, or other translations say to giving us the desire and the power to do what pleases Him. And I had these desires to be in this neighborhood that I knew nobody there, and there was nothing about that community that tied me to it. So I know God was telling me that day in Starbucks, I need to get over myself because the desires I've put in your heart are not yours, and you know by now that I'm working. And you can sit there and you can do some things for me when your plans have proven over and over to be very stoppable, or you can join me. It was as if God had just reached down His hand one more time and said, child, let's go. And so I determined that I was going to go back to Waterside, and this time I was going to go actually talk to somebody. I didn't know anybody, so I was just going to talk to the first person that I saw, the first person that was standing outside. See, Jesus said that my Father is always working to this very day, and I too am working. And I could say that too. I'm working too. But I wasn't always working on the same thing that the Father was working on. And over time, as a follower of Jesus, I have decided that my way wasn't working and I needed to follow Jesus. And if Jesus does what the Father does, I should do that too. So I went back to Waterside this time, prepared and determined to speak to the first person I saw. I did a couple warm-up laps, had some Hillsong going and a couple praise songs that get me pumped up, and honestly I was hoping that I wouldn't see anybody. But I was obeying, and so I drove around, and fortunately for the kingdom and unfortunately for me, there was a guy standing there in a field, so I stopped the van, got out, and very awkwardly, sheepishly went over to him and, sir, I don't know how this is going to sound, but I can't shake this feeling that there's somebody here that's trying to reach out for God. Do you know who it might be? And he did this, and I was doing this, and I'm thinking, I did it. God, I obeyed. Now can I go? And I was just, opened my eyes, and he looked up and he looked me right in the face, and he said, I think it's me. And then he told me his story. And there was a guy on a bike next to him, and the guy said, I think that could be me. And he told me his story. And in one of those moments where, the heavens part and understanding comes, it's like, I get it. I get it. You've gone before me. You were already working. You were just inviting me to join you in what you were already doing. So the three of us, me and these two guys, decided we're going to, through a longer conversation, we were going to do some kind of an event, a community event. And that was my excuse to go now and knock on every door in that community and invite them to a community block party. Ask them if they had any hot dogs or a grill or someone that had a bounce house or speakers or something. But it was my excuse to say, I can't shake this feeling that there's somebody here trying to reach out for God. Do you know who it might be? And I'm telling you, person after person after person said, I think it's me. I think it's me. I think it's me. And I would love to tell you those stories. Some of you have already heard them. They're amazing. I get goosebumps even still years later telling these stories about people who are just sitting on their couch asking God to send them someone to teach them how to read the Bible, and then there's a preacher right at their door. People are just, they're animated, they're scrubbing down, tears are coming down their face, saying, I knew that God was there, and I know I should make steps towards God. However they were describing this, it was like people had been called to Him. And all I had to do was just present myself, and walls would fall down. I didn't do any of that. All I did was just knock on a door. To this day, this was probably the most exhilarating time spiritually in my life, where I would see the miraculous right in front of me daily. These people started to gather. We did more block parties. Eventually, the association, it's a townhome association, gave us a 3-bedroom townhouse that used to be a crack house. God turned it into a lighthouse. The community came in, fixed it up. And in fact, the whole grassy area behind this townhouse was coral. It was just rocky, sharp coral. A guy broke his ankle just walking through it one day. And we were praying that God would send us some dirt or landfill or something just to cover it so that it would be safer. But God is able to do far and above anything we ask or imagine. And through His church, without us actually going and asking, we found one day that dozens of volunteers and dump truck loads of dirt or whatever it was, a landscaper had donated the time and the resources, pallets of sod, and they sculpted it so that the runoff, I mean, you don't even think of these things. God transformed this rocky coral behind our townhouse into a grassy area that now we do all our events in. He heals the land. He heals hearts. He is always working to this very day. So the first thing that I just want to remind you is that anything that we do for God is of infinitely lesser value than what we do with God. And before we move on to the second part, I just wanted to invite you to consider, am I working on the same thing that God's working on? It's a good question to ask yourself. It's a good question to ask God. Because He loves you and He listens. And He'll answer you. I said that was the most exhilarating spiritual experience probably of my life over a longer period of time. And then one day it just stopped, it seemed. It was like the riving water, spring up a well was just gushing, and then just someone turned off the water. And it was hard to come to grips with when it just stopped. The people that had been coming to church, the leaders that had been developing, just weren't there. Some we knew that had been sick, or some had moved. Some just stopped coming. People that had this hunger for God, that were just sitting there and their eyes were open and soaking in God's word, just stopped coming. People that had started their own discipleship groups without any influence from me, they just started teaching. They wanted to teach other people what they were learning. They just all stopped coming. Dark things started to happen more frequently than usual. It was as if an oppression had just settled over us, and it was heavy and it was dry. And I found myself, I want to say like an addict, because I was so used to that exhilaration of seeing God working right in front of me, that coming down from that was awful. And I was going through some kind of a spiritual withdrawal, I think. And I found myself doing more, spending more, investing financial resources, emotional resources, the resources of just time, desperately trying to prime that pump and get it to spring up again, get it to work. And one day I had this thought pass through my ears that I need to do more so that this church doesn't die. So if I don't do more right now, this could die. The kindness and the mercies of God that are new every morning are so undeserved, but they are so welcome. That when that thought passed through my head that I've got to do more so that this church doesn't die, I was instantly ashamed. And I was instantly almost like in tears and in laughter at the same time at how ridiculous it was. I was so ashamed of myself, and I laughed at myself that I could think that I could do more to make God's church grow more. And in his kindness, he was reminding me that I had that backwards again, that what I do for God is of infinitely lesser value than what I do with God. See, I was working again. I was working for God. And I'm realizing as I'm taking this all in, what happens if I start building a church that God is not involved in anymore? What if he's moved on? What if he's working somewhere else around me and I don't see it because I'm building this thing that he was working on a year ago? And I was horrified. What have I been doing? What am I doing now? And what am I gonna do? And then the next thought hit me, which is the second thing I want to share with you today, that what happens if I have to give this up? I'd already done that. I gave up everything in 1997 to go to New Orleans. And then in 2009, I just gave up everything. I surrendered all. I was singing the song and I was crying and it was scary, but it was an awesome feeling and a process, and God proved himself. But I don't want to do that again. What are you telling me, God? Are you saying that now I have to be willing to go and leave it all again? And what happened in that moment is I realized that this thing called Radiant Christian Community, this ministry had become a thing. It had happened so gradually and so slowly to me as I didn't realize how invested I was. And at some part it was God's church. He had started it, but at some point it had become mine too. It was really important to me. And I could feel, I could sense in his overwhelmingly beautiful and welcome kindness, Mike, it's time to surrender this. This isn't yours. So the next thing I'd like to share with you is the idea that the life that I leave is of infinitely lesser value than the life that I receive. Mark 8:35, Jesus himself says, whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. I knew that. You taught me that. I mean, for years, these are Bible verses that everybody knows. And I went through that process with my family, with my finances, with my dreams. You know, what I have to do is I just imagine my boys. Imagine them sitting in my hand. Right now I'd like to. And sometimes it's real hard, but just I do this psychosomatic thing where I just like lift them up and it's like, here they are. And I picture dropping them into his infinitely greater and stronger hands. And just this process of they're not mine, they're yours. And I can surrender and release myself not of responsibility over stewardship that he's given me, but ownership. But I'd never done that with this thing called Radiant, this church, this ministry, and he was telling me I needed to do that now. And so I did it, and it's always freeing. The life I leave is always of lesser value than the life I receive. When you surrender something, the freedom that you get in Christ is always better. And it seems like it was immediate. I'm sure it took weeks, maybe days, but going through this exercise, it seemed like the water turned back on. The leaders that had been missing, they started coming back. The people that were sick, they were healed, and they were coming back. The miraculous started to appear again. And it was, again, it began of just this. It was like God was telling me, Mike, I'm building this. This is mine. Don't forget that. Don't lose that. And when he was in charge again, things worked really well. And I was just, it was good. Linked with this point is the third idea that I want to share. That the life I leave is of lesser value than the life I receive. But the other truth is that God isn't necessarily really concerned with what I'm doing. Even if that whole experience, I know it wasn't just for me. His kingdom is so much greater than me, but he loves me and he cares about me. So I'm telling you my story from my point of view of how I went through this. But he wasn't so concerned about what I was doing. God's concerned about who I'm becoming. Because he has promised in his word that he has chosen me to be transformed into the image of his son Jesus. His final plan for me is not this. Who he is creating me to be, who he is transforming me to be, is of so much more value to him than the things that I'm doing. And that's true for all of us. His unstoppable plan for us is for us to be transformed into the image of his son Jesus. He has told us, he has promised us in Scripture that we are being transformed from glory to glory. I think that's how the King James puts it. That's the beautiful, I love it. We are being transformed from glory to glory. I think the New Living says that we are being transformed into his likeness with ever increasing glory. So I'd like to encourage you that whatever you're doing, even if you've got this straight and you're doing it for God, or you're doing something with God, you know that you're following him in what he is laying out before you, that even the steps that we take to follow him are of infinitely lesser value than who he is transforming us to become. Every month we do a block party at our church. We give away 100 boxes of food to the first 100 families. We'll give people a red ticket, that we'll give them a free hot dog or free snack, and then we'll give them a blue ticket, and they'll get another round of snacks or another trip through our clothing donation giveaway. We bribe people with our blue tickets to listen to the gospel. And every month we see another example of how God is working. But we teach each other, we're constantly reminding ourselves that we have block parties for basically two main reasons. One reason is to see who will be coming, because this is our chance to go and knock on doors and invite people to come, because we want to tell them about Jesus. We want them to see him and hear his story. So we want to see who will be coming. But the other reason why we do a block party is to experience who we will becoming, who we are becoming. Does that make sense? We want to see who will be coming from the outside, but we want to know who we're becoming. Because every time we get together, it's an opportunity for us to love each other even when we don't like each other. It's an opportunity for us to get on each other's nerves. It's an opportunity for us to be frustrated and angry that things aren't running the way they were supposed to do. And this person didn't do what they were supposed to, and this person said that to me. We're people. We're flaky and shaky, and we do things wrong all the time. And anytime we get together, it's more and more obvious. So we do block parties. Honestly, one of the main reasons we do block parties is so that we will be together as a community and just get on each other's nerves. Because this is our laboratory. This is our chance to practice becoming. The miracles that prove that God is always working are happening all the time. The ones that often call our attention is when he proves his power over the physical universe, when he calms the waves, or when he heals somebody, when he heals the land, when he our townhouse, we signed the deed for $10 in 2011, and then we were waiting for the bank to foreclose on it. Well, we discovered like a year and a half ago, somewhere in there, that the bank dismissed the mortgage. I think it's a miracle when a bank says we don't want money. And so when God demonstrates his power over the physical universe, financially or healing, that calls our attention. But we do block parties also so that we can notice, so that we can train our brains and our minds and our hearts to see and notice when God demonstrates his power over our own sinful nature and over our own hearts. When God demonstrates his power by working in us to will and to act according to his good pleasure. When we choose to love when we don't want to. When we choose to have patience when we don't want to. When we choose to have kindness when we don't want to. When his Spirit breaks through and works in a way that only God can, when our sinful nature wants to stay in the past. Those are miracles. That is proof that God is working. And that we do block parties so we can see what God is doing in us, who we are becoming. So I want to encourage you, these three things, let me repeat them, that what I do for God is of infinitely lesser value than what I do with God, because his plans are unstoppable and mine are stoppable. And when he reveals something that he's doing, often that means that we need to leave something that we care about or that we're doing, and we need to surrender. And what we leave for God is of infinitely lesser value and even enjoyment than what we receive when we join him. And what we do and what we are doing is of infinitely lesser value than who we are becoming. Ask yourself, ask your Savior, who are you becoming? When you struggle, when you have those moments where his patience or his kindness breaks through, celebrate those, because that's a miracle. He can cast out demons, but he can change your heart. And celebrate it. Celebrate his goodness and his kindness and his power. Celebrate his unstoppable plans. and that he would reach down and invite us to join him in what he is doing. It is a privilege, and it's an honor, and it's a joy that is more fulfilling than anything that we can concoct to do for him. I'd love to tell you some more stories. If you've ever been around me, you know that's true. So either flee from me or approach me. And I just again wanted to thank you for the opportunity to share. I want to thank you for all of the investment that you've made in God's kingdom through your support and your prayers and what God is doing. Thank you for joining him in what you've seen that he was doing around us and around our family. And thank you for your part in just encouraging who we are becoming for his glory. Thank you.
As we close this morning, let's sing this prayer and ask God to continue to work in and through our hearts that we might join with him in what he's doing in our lives and in our community and world. Let's stand and sing, "Be Thou My Vision."